Good afternoon, everybody. It is 2:59. We're going to give it a minute or two. I hear we have a very full house today. There's supposedly 90 of all the guardians up on this APD presentation, so we're going to give it a few minutes. But since there are so many people attending, if you want to introduce yourself, please put it in the chat. We do not have time for actual formal on-screen introductions, but if you want to put in the chat, where in the state you are and how long you've been a guardian, we'd love to know. And we're just going to give it another minute or two, and then we will kick the presentation off. We have a very knowledgeable APD person on our webinar today. Claudia's going to tell us all about all sorts of stuff.
Julie, can you guys hear me at all or no?
Yeah, we can hear you. You could say something if you want. Teresa's on unstable internet, just as a heads up. What else
I just
is
want to
new?
know.
Wait a minute. Teresa's unstable?
What up, Mom? I just want to know, Claudia, how do you want the questions? Do you want them in chat? Do you want them as you go?
Let's do them at the end. And have them put them in chat so that if there's duplicates, Julie can kind of sort through it.
Yeah, I'll read you the
things.
questions, Claudia, not a problem. So everybody, as you have questions and as they come up, please just put them in chat and we will definitely make time for them at the end. We're going to give it just a minute longer and then we will kick this thing off. So I'm going to give it till about 3:02, Claudia. Just give it a minute more.
Whatever. I'm here at your beck and call.
And it looks like while we're waiting, Glenn Krasny said hi. Freddie Jones is the 5th Judicial Circuit. He's been a guardian for 3 years. Hi, everybody. If you guys want to drop in the chat where you are and how long you've been a guardian, we'd love to hear it. Teresa Grady is with Aging Solutions. She said she's been a guardian for 10 years.
Where?
Tammy from Alpert Jewish Family Service with a few of her work colleagues. She's in Palm Beach County, and she said, thank you for having the program. And it's 3:02, so we will go ahead and get started. Claudia, do you want to introduce to everybody who you are and what you're here to talk to us about today?
Sure. I'm Claudia Porpelia. I'm a care manager, benefits consultant, and I've been a professional guardian for the last 4+ years. But I was doing guardian type work with Teresa Barton before that. The topic is APD. And one of the reasons I said I named it APD, a rocking boat, is I've been personally involved with some form of developmental disabilities with the state of Florida for 38 years. So I was with them when it was developmental services in the beginning. I went through the change to APD. I went through the change with the tier system. I went through the change to the algorithm. And now we're facing another change that for many of us, especially if we're relying on services, is a little bit rocky and unnerving. So I've presented on APD before, but I kind of want to do it a little differently and educate you on some of the things that are happening so that if you have APD clients or you know people that have APD clients, you can help them be more successful in getting services for their people. So we're going to start with definitions and the challenges with definitions. So this is one of you're going to receive some handouts when you get your certificate. And this is going to be one of the handouts. And it's eligibility for agency services. And it's actually right off the law website. So it's the most current one I could find. And in that document, they talk about autism, intellectual disability, Down syndrome, all the different categories. But what they don't talk about is how they're interpreting those. And because I've had the privilege of doing some hearings over the last few years, I've seen where it's not as cut and dry as they've said before, or it seems to be. So to give you an example with autism, APD cannot define what severe behaviors are. So you can look at their list and you'll see it later. And your person can have a lot of these things, but then it says severe behavioral disorders, which may include, and they give you some examples, such as restrictive, repetitive, and stereotype patterns of behavior, interests, activities, encompassing preoccupation with things, multiple nonverbal behaviors, such as not being able to make eye contact, lack of facial expression. They label those as severe behaviors, but I have higher functioning autism that have those severe behaviors that have been denied by APD all the way to hearing. So one of the cautions I give everyone is if the person is both autism and intellectual disability, which means an IQ of 70 or below by age 18, then apply under intellectual disability. Do not apply under autism. I just helped a family and we literally had the hearing canceled the day of the hearing, who had come from New York and thought it was fine to go with autism. And they got denied. And we appealed it. And there was a state representative hounding APD and we were getting nowhere. And then as I looked through their documents, I saw he had an IQ of 59. So when we had the first initial hearing that got postponed, I said, well, then just change it to intellectual disability. Well, no, you have to totally reapply. So it's just being aware that autism, because of the interventions we've done over the last few years, is not always the best category to apply under. If there's another eligibility category, use that one. And if you have proof of it. Another thing that's happening with the definitions is, and it's interesting, this is only 2 years old, I believe, and one of the categories is mental retardation or intellectual disability. There's still, because some of the state laws use MR versus ID, using that term. It says IQ of 70 below, and it's supposed to be based on manifested before the age of 18. I have had multiple people call me, and even though they had an IQ score of 70 or below before age 18, they request that the individual have another IQ test. That's problematic in my mind, because if the law says before 18, then why are we doing an IQ at 30 or 32 or 40? And IQ scores are a combination of adaptive skills and intellectual skills. And as people get older, that number can go up or down based on their exposure and what happens. So again, just be aware. I've never told someone to deny doing the test, but I would do a hearing if I was denied because they had a 65 IQ when they were 15, and now the state is saying they have a 71 IQ. That is definitely something you question. Another one that I like to share is Down syndrome. They like to have genetic testing for Down syndrome. And with our younger people, almost always they have genetic testing because it's done at birth or even pre-birth. The problem is some of the older ones didn't get genetic testing. It was obvious they were Down syndrome. Doctors put it on a document. I had a family that moved their loved one from Canada when his parents died. They applied to APD under Down syndrome and they were denied because they didn't have genetic testing. Ridiculous. So they called me up and I said, listen, here's what I would do. Do you have the money to do genetic testing? They said, we do. Said, then send an email to APD and say, well, genetics doesn't change. We're happy to pay for a genetic test to prove he's Down syndrome. They were approved without the genetic testing. So again, we have to remember the people in the offices that we're dealing with. The people we're dealing with in the offices aren't the bad guys. They're stuck with rules and they're told how to wield them. And, I always tell guardians and parents and different people that are working with APD, they'll start to complain. I went, wait a minute, they didn't make the rules. they're stuck in the middle, and many of the APD people have a loved one that is developmentally disabled, a lot of them, and they're just as frustrated as we are. So that's kind of the definitions, and there's more info in there. The one other thing I want to mention about the definitions is, let's see, it is, well, they don't have page numbers, but it's where it talks about who can make that determination, what document is good. They say that in establishing eligibility for a diagnosis of autism, you have to have a Florida licensed psychologist or a Florida licensed psychiatrist or a board certified pediatric neurologist who is qualified by training and experience, or a board certified developmental pediatrician. And then it talks about collateral information from another state. If the person who did it meets Florida standards, would be accepted. Again, this is one of those areas where if you ever are helping someone or you have a ward and you have out-of-state documents, you may have to fight a little because they've become very particular in their definition, and state standards are not the same from state to state, just like Medicaid isn't the same. So it's really important to just be aware of what it is they want. If you can't have it, be ready to provide something else. Think outside the box. So that's kind of the definition end of it that I wanted to talk about. You know, it is all of the categories have more than one thing they're asking for, and sometimes we don't have, like, one of the things that they ask for with intellectual disability and autism is behavior reports and that. Well, my daughter's 40. They didn't keep behavior reports back then with those that were intellectually disabled or autism. They're not the kind they want. So, you know, don't be afraid to say, you know, that isn't available. That is one of the things I do want us all to become aware of, because we have friends, we are in communities. Most of us as guardians are very friendly and talk to people. Be very aware to encourage people you know who have a developmentally disabled child, who keep documents 3 to 5 years after they graduate high school or leave high school. Documents are destroyed other than the transcript. And Florida transcripts do not show anything about intellectual disability, autism, any of those things. So, you know, that's more for other people, but it's just something to be aware of. Help people out when you can. So let's talk about the programs and services. And Kate, if you can put up the first slide about pre-enrollment that I sent you, that would be great. The website. She's getting it up there. All right, so pre-enrollment categories. So there's basically 7 categories. So when you get someone eligible for APD, they state what category they're eligible under in the way of developmental disability, and then they place them in a category. So category 1 is one where they are deemed to be in crisis. That can be because they've had DCF involvement, police involvement, they're homeless, danger to self or others, caregiver unable to give care. Now, I want to talk a little bit about caregiver unable to give care and homelessness. Homelessness does not necessarily mean that they are on the street. What it means is they don't have an appropriate place to live. And you kind of have to think out of the box on that. Same thing, caregiver unable to give care. They don't have to necessarily be totally to the point where they literally can't do anything for them. But if they have health issues, I have a case I'm working in Polk County right now, where the mother's had multiple heart issues and that the dad is gone, and they're trying to get him on APD. And, you know, we're emphasizing that she's been in the hospital several times and there's really been no one to care for him. People that she knows are having to step in. And we're using that, and I think it's going to be successful. So again, in these definitions, think outside the box. Category 2 is when they have an open case with DCF, and there's a welfare area, etc. So, you know, that's not a common thing, but it's becoming more common with especially males that hit the teen years. They tend to have issues, whether it be sexual or aggressive. And you may run into that when you inherit a case, and you may be able to use that. Now, we'll talk in a little bit about what that means, but right now, just be aware that you can get them moved up in category. Category 3, it category 3 is it's whose caregiver has been documented condition that is expected to render the caregiver unable to provide care within the next 12 months, and for whom a caregiver is required but no alternate caregiver is available. So again, that's pretty simple, but again, outside the box. One of the things that I learned is if you know there's a family in crisis and they're having health issues, I have seen where APD gives temporary funding because a parent is going to have 3 months where they cannot physically take care of their children. That can be a toe in the door to push for services ongoing, because if they don't recuperate all the way. So again, most of the time we're not dealing with parents, but sometimes we are. Sometimes we're made guardian for a reason other than the parent being gone. And we just need to keep ourselves aware. Go down to 4, the incarceration is in there as well, and behaviors. They have to be well documented. With behaviors, you need to document and have witnesses. Make sure that if somebody has aggressive behavior, you are documenting every incident, the day, the time, where it happened, what triggered it. And then if they're in a mental institution, which I've had several calls from guardians over the last 2 years of individuals that ended up in the state mental hospital because there was nowhere for them and they were trying to get them into a group home. And this is one of the avenues to use. Category 4, caregivers 60 years of age or older. Now, I've shared this before when I presented. Used to say 70 and older. They now say 60 and older. But I had a 90-year-old that could not get crisis. Makes no sense. He could not get crisis for his daughter, and she ended up in a nursing home before it was over. So, but that is a category. And one of the things that you have to do is you have to be very aware of when they turn that age, because APD does not necessarily automatically change their category. Someone needs to push them and say, hey, they should be in another category. I just had to do that for one of my clients last week. Category 5 are the ones that are graduating high school or aging out of high school, and they need a meaningful day activity. This is another great way to get an individual in the door with APD. Get them in a day program. Get APD to pay for it. Over the last few years, money has been set aside with APD so that they could fund day program for someone. So, that is an area, again, you may not get everything you need, but it's a step in. And with any of these agencies, anything you can do to get your foot in the door is great. All right, so then category 6 is, to my little cheat sheet, it includes clients 21 years of age or older who do not meet the criteria for 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Isn't that deep and thought-provoking? And then category 7 are clients younger than 21 who do not meet the category for that. And it's usually when there's some special circumstance that comes up. So those are the categories. Now we're going to pull up another one right away, which is the pre-enrollment prioritization form. And there's going to be 2 things that you're going to get with your certificate. You're going to get the prioritization tool, and you're going to get a QSI. Now, the QSI that I was able to download from APD's website is not the exact one they're using, but if you have someone that you're trying to get in, one of the things they do is come and do a QSI, and they ask questions. You need to be aware of what they're going to ask and what their answers that are available are, because the QSI is set up where there's a question and then there's 3, 4, or 5 check marks. Your person may not fit exactly in one of them. So if you think about it ahead of time, you're able to get them the higher rating if you could think of examples to make it fit. This questionnaire, and I didn't put it to Kate because it is 43 pages long. But those of you who've been through a QSI, they ask, have there been any major changes in the last 12 months? That gives them points. It asks about, how they eat. Do they eat with utensils? Do they need assistance, et cetera? It asks about daily living skills. It asks about if they could work or not. It asks about their ambulatory status, their behaviors. There's all the categories. I gave that QSI to you because I find that often, especially if someone is in a group home, the guardians don't go to the QSI. Matter of fact, the guardians don't know about the QSI because APD contacts the group home. You want to be a part of this process. What if the day of the QSI, the staff member that at the group home is someone that just got hired? And they're sitting there and they're helping provide information for your individual. You can't rely on that. This is where the algorithm comes in. The QSI is what they use to come up with the numbers that determine level of care for the individual. Now, they do have a scale that allows them to add to that as well. But that base number is a huge deal. And if wrong information is used, they only redo these every 3 years. So, you're stuck. So this is something you really want to be aware of and you want to be a part of. And then this is just the sheet that after they do the QSI, they plug in the different numbers and they come up with where that pre-enrollment is. And it's listed, there's a pre-enrollment sheet that you get when they put you into the system as pre-enrolled. It isn't right when you become eligible, it's sometime in that continuum. And it kind of gives an idea of what the person's going to need if they come off the wait list. So again, it's an important piece. Now I want to talk about the programs. That's how you get on the list for a program. So there are 3 programs under APD right now. There's the iBudget, okay, and the iBudget, Kate, no, I don't have that. Sorry, I didn't do that. It's the iBudget is the main program. So that's where the majority of MedWaiver funds go through and are given to people. Okay. And the iBudget, yes, I did send it. I didn't think I did. I did. So basically it has categories of services. Be familiar with those services so that if you have someone that comes off the wait list or is ready for gets crisis approved, you know what to ask for. They've life skills can be anything from a workshop to someone helping them get a job or a one-on-one companion. There's different things. Supplies and equipment, personal supports, so personal supports are, help with personal care, feeding, bathing, etc. Then there's residential services, and there's different options for that. One that often gets missed by people, both parents and guardians, is supported living. So we get the idea that in order to live independently with supported living, they have to be totally ready to be on their own. And that's not the purpose of supported living. The purpose of supported living is to avoid group home and teach them the skills they need to be more successful. APD is pretty good about, lots of times they help with placing 2 individuals in an apartment. They don't place them, but they find, they rent it together. And one may have lots of services and the other may have less. That's a way to maximize the ability for them to be successful. I know in the central region they do that. We have an apartment complex near my house where there are a number of them that live together. The other advantage of that is the apartment management understands developmental disabilities because they've been there for years. So when a neighbor complains about something, they don't automatically jump on it. They understand that there may be more to the story and they're willing to work with them. And then there's therapeutic supports. Those are all things like the therapies, behavioral, etc. Transportation, if you're putting someone in a group home and they're going to go to a workshop, you want transportation in there. You've got to pay someone to get them there and back, whether it's the group home or a transportation company or the workshop itself and their vans. So don't miss that. Dental services isn't as frequent anymore since they went to the 3 dental companies and that. But occasionally, if somebody has something that is major that has to be done, APD will give some funding towards that. Now let's look at CDC Plus. So CDC Plus, all I have for that is a brochure, and she'll send it to you. But CDC Plus is a purchasing plan program. So it's under the iBudget, basically. But the money that an individual gets is put into a pot. The individual becomes an employer. My daughter is Tina M. Porpelia, and she is Inc., and she is the employer of all the people that work for her. The state does everything but the initial paperwork. They send you the initial paperwork. You have to sign the things that make her an employer. From there on out, they process payroll. You just put it in, etc. I am talking a lot about this program right now because we're going to talk about managed care in a minute. And this program, we have been told, will either not be messed with at all or will be the last to go on managed care because it's a purchasing plan program. It already has controls in how the money is spent. So this may be, in the past, a lot of guardians go, I don't know, and do CDC Plus, whatever. But if you have an individual that's living in the community, usually with group home, it doesn't work. But if you have somebody that's supported living or living in the community, roommate with a roommate in a room, whatever, this may be a good program for you. The other reason it's a good program is you hire the people you want to hire. Now they have to go through the level 2 background check. They have some paperwork they have to do. They have to pass the good moral character standard. But it allows you more flexibility in who is working for your individual. And in general, I find when I talk to families that do CDC Plus, their providers don't not show up like Medicaid. And they are good about networking you to other people who might want to do this kind of work. I initially did a lot of high school and college students because they could come and take care of my daughter and then they could do some homework. And it was a great job for them. They also would take her to events at school. She was taking the class more than once at Valencia and Seminole State. So again, that's an exception, an exceptional situation. But this program, if you're worried about managed care, is a good program to look at if you can get in it. And when you get approved, you can ask to go to a CDC Plus program. And it just depends on whether they have a space open or not. So far, I haven't had anyone that wasn't able to get on. The other thing is a lot of the good waiver support coordinators are going more and more to taking CDC Plus customers and not iBudget customers. They see the writing on the wall with managed care. They feel like they can better serve individuals. So that's what they're doing. Now I'm going to talk about the elephant in the room. The IDD pilot program. I didn't realize that's what they call it, but it's the IDD pilot program. And that is, that's the first web page. Okay. Sorry, I didn't tell her that. So it is under ACA, and she's going to put up an ACA website in a minute that tells you a little bit about it. So right now, it is not in every area in our state, but it is spreading. I have a client in Tallahassee, and that client just got a pre-enrollment letter and gave him the option of iBudget or the managed care program. And his mother called me and I said, iBudget, do iBudget. And then if you could do CDC Plus under it, great, but if you can't. So there's a couple reasons I say that. First of all, it's new. And I named this a rocking boat because every time there are changes in APD, anybody that's worked with them for any length of time knows, every time there's a change, things are a mess. They went to iConnect computers, it's a system almost 4 years ago, and they're still having issues with it. It's government. It's government at its best and its worst. So that's one reason. But the other reason is when we look at intellectual disabilities or developmental disabilities, It is a wide group of people. When you look at the elderly, there are differences, but there are way more similarities than there are differences. That's not true. We have everything from high functioning autistic to people that are on a vent and are tube fed that are under APD. So that's the first thing that makes it difficult because the case managers, their load, we know from the elderly program, their load, they can't do a great job with what they have to do. But I found something else that worried me. Put up the second slide for IDD, please, Kate. So that's the areas it's in, and it's spreading though, because Tallahassee is above there. All right. So this next slide is going to show you something that I did not know until I read it this morning. And it made me shake in my shoes. So it says you can choose, it's coming up, you can choose to go with the IDD pilot program. Okay, you can come off the wait list at pre-enrollment and you can go to that. But go to question, I believe it's question 4 and 5. 4. No, it isn't. It's I'll find it here in a minute. Oh, number 6. What if I change my mind about participation in the Intellectual Disabilities and Developmental Disabilities Managed Care Pilot Program? Participation in the Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Managed Care Program is voluntary, and the individuals may disenroll at any time. Individuals who decide to disenroll from the Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Managed Care Pilot Program may return to a pre-enrollment category or may be eligible for participation in other pathways. Right there. So basically what that's saying is if you choose to go into the pilot program and they don't have the providers available because it's a pilot program, they don't have what you need, and you decide, oh, wait, I want to do iBudget. You don't go directly to iBudget. You go back on the wait list. And I don't know, I haven't been able to talk to anybody yet that has actually had a conversation with someone in making this change. But as a parent who's been on a wait list and gets off the wait list, it would be devastating to 6 months down the road to realize this pilot program isn't working and to be stuck back on the wait list. So just a consideration as you have wards that may need APD. I'm not going to tell you not to use the pilot program, but I'm going to say it is way too new right now. And in the areas it's in, who are the providers? The providers are not Medicaid providers. They are providers that contract with managed care. They may be Medicaid providers too, but we don't have any guarantee of who's going to go with them. The other thing I am concerned about is the fact that, as we all know, managed care is a for-profit. And if they're given a lump sum of money, their job is to make money. So what are they going to do? Group homes fought to get more money a few years ago because they couldn't pay their people well enough. So if a group home goes with the managed care, what's going to happen? Do they get less money? How is that going to work? And again, I'm being very careful. I said, what if? But there's just a lot of what ifs with this. So I think we need to be very careful as people that are responsible for other people in how we look at this right now. And then the last thing I want to talk about under the programs is general fund. So APD has a general fund. I don't know exactly how much goes into it every year, but they have a general fund and money goes into it. That fund can be used for things like getting someone into a day program or maybe getting them into a group home. Again, it's a great way to get someone off the wait list, but is it going to continue the next year? Are they going to segue them to the iBudget program? What are they going to do? Again, I would not deny the funds if it was offered. Just be aware that that's not a guarantee. That's not, general fund is not technically a program. It's just a way to get someone some help. I just had a mother yesterday meet with a waiver support coordinator. It's a family I help with Social Security and some other things. And her son has severe cerebral palsy. He's total care. And she's going to get some money from the general fund. You know, and I just told her, I said, you're going to need, you and your waiver support coordinator are going to need to keep pushing for him to be put on the I budget or the CDC plus budget, because you're not, you can't guarantee those general funds are going to continue. Before I go to services, I do want to make one other statement. I make this almost every time I talk about a government agency. One of the reasons that APD got in so much trouble is during the flourishing years where they had plenty of money, and part of that was under Jeb Bush. No matter how you feel politically, they had money then. Part of the problem is that their fiscal year ends June 30th. Any of the federal money they've received that is not spent by June 30th gets returned to the federal government, and they are in jeopardy of having their budget reduced. This led to, instead of saving that money for the rainy day when more people move to Florida with disabled children, instead of doing that, they would call families in the month of June and say, do you need anything? I knew families that had whole rooms full of medical equipment, whole rooms that were purchased through APD. That isn't the case anymore, but that's something, again, that's my my political soapbox. I would love to see that changed. I would love to see that if federal money is left over, it be invested in to the program itself, to make the program better. And however, I don't think we're going to be there for a long time at the rate we are. All right, let's look at services really quickly, because I want to make sure that we have time for questions. So put up the first one, Kate. We looked at the iBudget services. We looked at that. Put up the CDC services. That's a handout. So the iBudget services had 8 categories with some subcategories. When you see the CDC plus one, you're going to be, not that, I sent you one, it was just a chart. CDC services. I can't remember what it's titled. I didn't do a good job of numbering these. These aren't Kate's problem. It's mine.
I don't see it.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
anyway, I'll make sure that she gets it and can send it to you when I'm done here. So basically, the CDC services is much broader. On the CDC list, there's even a gym membership if it meets the goals on the support plan. In-home services, which is a really broad category. And the great thing about that, as a matter of fact, I'm going to change my purchasing plan the next time I do one to in-home services. I've been using personal care and companion, because in-home services includes taking them out grocery shopping, doing all the different things. There are just some extra things you can get out of CDC that you can't necessarily get with the iBudget. The other place that I could see CDC being good for us as guardians with someone in supported living is, in supported living, you have a job coach, you have a supported living coach, you may have an in-home, but let's say you choose to have a companion versus in-home. Because of the way they do in-home support, that companion could be put on the payroll that way. And that would allow them to do both in-home and community-based services. So again, just, I know that's a lot of information, especially if you haven't done a lot with APD, but you're looking for the best way to provide maximum support for the individual with the least amount of hassle with APD. All right, so let's move on to the managed care, talk a little more about it. I mentioned the diversity of demographics and a little bit about past transitions. As I was looking through the people that have talked in the chat, most of you, I don't think, were guardians when we had the tier system. So the tier system was based on how much money the person had in their budget. And it was something to the extent of 15,000 and below was tier 1, tier 2 was 35,000 and below, tier 3 was 60,000 and below, and tier 4 was everything over that. They made this ridiculous rule that tier 3, which was 35 to 60,000, only applied to people that were living in group homes. Well, when they put in the tier system, there were many people who were living at home that had services in that $35 to $60,000 range because it was cheaper for APD to let them stay home with their parents and have support there than to have them in the group home. So they had the services, it was a good deal. Well, all of a sudden, they're being cut to under $35,000. That's just one example of how these changes become complicated. When you ask someone about the pilot program for managed care, and I think you've talked about this on the peer group too, nobody can give you a straight answer about anything. Even the organization that is handling the managed care, Florida Family Care, I can't remember their exact name, but anyway, I've talked to them, and there's a lot of things that I ask that they're like, well, we don't quite know that. We're not sure about that. That's a red flag to me. If the very agency that's supposed to help launch this pilot and possibly make it a reality can't answer questions, then what does that do to our wards if they were to go into that program? It's going to be a lot of work for us and maybe less services for them. Providers, big question mark. I know that several months ago, or no, about a year ago, I heard rumors that the nonprofit group home groups like Quest and some of the bigger ones were being approached and asked if they would be willing to buy up the small group homes so that they would be under the nonprofit and be part of managed care. Luckily, the people that run these nonprofits know that they're trying to find a way to pay less. So they said no, they would not be willing to do that. But that begs a question. What's going to happen to the individual group homes? And we have some good group homes owners that have 1 or 2 or 3 group homes in the Central Florida area. And what's going to happen to them if the pilot program becomes a permanent program? And we're nowhere near that. I mean, the CDC Plus pilot was 3 years long, and then they made it a program, and it took them another 3 years to put everybody that was in the pilot group into the program. But it is a concern. And then, as I said earlier, the fact that if you go into the program and then decide it is not working for your individual, that you may not get any funding and you may go back on a wait list. That is a huge, huge, huge concern. So in wrapping up, I think the thing you have to do when you're working in developmental disabilities and trying to work with APD is make friends in the agency. Make friends. When you're upset, I mean, I get upset and I'm talking to someone there, and at the end, I always say, I know you're not the reason that this situation has happened, and I appreciate what you're doing. And I have built a lot of bridges over the years. And I have yelled at some of them over the years. When my daughter was younger, I lost my cool with more than one of them. But I always said at the end, listen, I know it's the legislators. Be very aware that they are in a hard position. They don't like saying no, even though it seems like they do. So just make friends in the agency if you can, if you have an individual. The second thing I would say is what I said before, think outside the box. When you're looking at someone, you get a ward and you become the guardian because the parent is sick and dying. And they're living at home with their parent, and you know that they can't stay in that home. Maybe there's a mortgage, maybe the home's in disrepair, whatever it may be. You need to put in a crisis case right away and use homelessness, use the health, do both things, provide as much information as possible, medical records for the parent, etc. Do this quickly. Don't wait until you see, well, do they have 3 months or 12 months? Because that's just not going to work. You need to be able to get funding and get your foot in the door. Don't be afraid to ask for a hearing. Even though I'm seeing more denials and hearings, do not be afraid to do it. It's a little bit of time and you may just get it. The other thing is make sure that if you have any proofs that fit APD, get them in a week or more before the hearing, because often they will call before the hearing and say we've resolved it. Matter of fact, my one that I talked about with autism and intellectual disability, we did a hearing, we went ahead with the hearing request, even though they said we couldn't say intellectual disability. And at the same time, we submitted an intellectual disability application, which normally takes 6 months, even though they say 90 days. And the day before the hearing, Dad gets a letter that he's been approved. The hearing office didn't even know it. So again, there's no harm in asking for a hearing. Um, so, I think this is where I find that lots of guardians don't want to do developmental disabilities. And I realize I have the advantage of having lived it for 40 years. But I can tell you it's no different than any other government program. You have to think, you have to build bridges, you have to do your due diligence in order and keep up with updates and know what's happening. And you can serve these people well. So I think we should go to questions.
Okay, so you have one question in the chat from Cindy. She wanted to know if you could expand on the benefits of CDC Plus over iBudget. Can you clarify what the additional services are available in CDC Plus specifically?
Okay, hold on. Let me see if I have that. I do. So first of all, I need to tell you this. You do give back some of the funding you get to be in CDC Plus. So when CDC Plus started, um, they were the only one that you could change how your money was spent. So if you got 20,000 for personal care and you got 5,000 for companion, you could use some of your personal care money um, for companion or vice versa. What I did was they gave me incontinence money and I chose to use that money towards care because then I have less out of pocket and I can buy my own pull-ups cheaper than they can. So that's one of the things. That has changed because you now have flexibility with iBudget. But the second advantage of CDC Plus is you hire who you want and it doesn't have to be a Medicaid provider. We all have had, probably if we've had any APD clients with providers, had the Medicaid horror stories of, the caregiver that doesn't show up or, trying to find an agency that has caregivers, et cetera. So, again, that's one of them. Now let's talk about the services. And I have the quick reference here and I will make sure Kate gets it. So most of you know there's unrestricted services. Those are the things that you can move the money around any way you want. Restricted services are things like therapy, nursing, those kind of things. That money has to be used specifically. So here are some of the services names. Adult day training, which is your workshop. Companion services, which is a non-medical care and socialization. And they also can help with self-care tasks. Now, why did they have that in there? Meal prep, etc. Because if you take them out in public and they have to use the restroom, somebody's got to help them often. So you're able to do that. Consumable medical supplies. This is the one that I told you about, gym membership. And it says regular or periodic membership in a gym to participate in a program specifically designed to maintain the maximum health of the consumer. How many of our consumers are overweight and need a gym? Okay, that's one of the areas. In-home support. So that's assistance, companionship, personal care, things to help maintain the home if they're living in their own home, housekeeping, cooking, training to help learn these skills. And so, there's a good one. Other therapies. And they refer to a handbook, which I don't have on what that is. Over-the-counter medications. Sometimes you can have in the budget. Now, I wouldn't do that. I'd use it for care and pay for the over-the-counter medications out of pocket because it's easier to do. I'm getting to whether or not it's horse therapy, music therapy. Hang on, I'm getting there, Allison. Parts and repairs. So that has to do with wheelchairs and things. And it's hard sometimes to get Medicaid to do that. Personal care assistance, Oh, a personal emergency response system. So let's say somebody is in supported living and they have some physical issues, but they can live alone and they don't have care during the night. They can have personal emergency response system. I've fallen and can't get up button paid for by the state. Respite care. This is any kind of supported supervision for the person during a brief absence. So I I do mine as a savings for when I go to conferences, when I get a vacation, which we won't talk about how often I take a vacation, etc. It's in my daughter's budget. Seasonal camps can be paid through CDC Plus. Again, it's got to be in your purchasing plan, but it can be done. Um, Specialized training to improve life, supported employment, supported living coaching, transportation. Then there's a bunch of restricted services. And I do want to talk about these because I'm getting ready. I've been trying to get a bed for my daughter that has a netting and keeps her in bed because she falls out of it all the time. Now, she's on a day bed near the floor, but I am getting old and 65 pounds is a lot to pick up from the floor in the morning. So I've tried to get it through Medicare and Medicaid. They won't answer the DME company. I'm getting ready to see if they'll let me use some of my savings to buy that bed. So, that's one of the things. Adult dental assessments. That's a restricted service, but you can put some money aside to have a behavioral assessment, a PT assessment, whatever it is. Dietitian services. It's another one. So let's say you want your person is living more independently and they're not eating right. You want them to go to a dietitian to get some help. That can be in this budget. Durable medical equipment, I just mentioned that. Environmental modifications. So you can do this with iBudget too, but it's really hard to get approval for that. I have a young man who's living on his own. His dad died 2.5 years ago, and he needs a bathroom modified. He's lived in this house without a modified bathroom his whole life, and he's severe CP. He needs a modification. And then after that, he really needs a kitchen modification because he's very limited in the kitchen. But that's something he's working on. Therapies, private duty nursing, respiratory therapy, things like that. So vehicle modification. So again, some of these are available in iBudget too, but the difference is you're given a budget, and if you can save some of your money, then you can use it. Now, horse and music therapy, I think might fall. I mean, I don't know for sure. They don't specifically mention that, but there are some categories I just read off, like the specialized training, seasonal camp, which there's camps for that. There was another one I just saw and I can't find it now, but there's some room. I do know I talked to one family that does do horse therapy and they found a way to have it paid for under CDC.
Yeah, and
So,
Allison's saying they could be paid for under CDC
right.
with
Well,
this
and like I
budget.
said, it's having a waiver support coordinator that knows what category to put it in because it's not specifically listed. So those are things, there's just more flexibility, a lot more flexibility. More questions.
Well, it's more of a comment, but Jean says she's new to APD and she has serious concerns with waiver support coordinator. The successor guardian and the ward's reports don't even have her name spelled correctly.
Okay, so I was trying to be nice. I hope there are no waiver support coordinators on this that are also guardians. Usually there aren't, but I'm going to be honest with you. When APD decided the waiver support coordinators had to be in a company of at least 4 waiver support coordinators, they could not be independent. We lost a lot of good waiver support coordinators. I will be honest with you, all of my waiver support coordinators until that happened were independents. Several reasons for that. They were dependent on the income that they were getting under waiver support. So they did a good job because they didn't want to lose people. Often they were people with experience in developmental disabilities, etc. So, you know, I don't list the waiver support coordinator usually in my annual plan. I list APD services as a general category because in some cases, if I had to list everything, if I listed all of my daughter's providers on her annual plan, I would have a list as long as doctors and that. So I'm not as worried about that, but if you don't have a good coordinator, talk to other people, find one, find an agency that's good. If you find an agency, let's say somebody says so-and-so is good, find out if the other coordinators in the agency are good or not. Because if they aren't, you want that specific one. You can't always get it. But you have the right to change coordinators. They are a service provider for the individual. So, don't be satisfied. Contact someone, ask how you get a new support coordinator. First of all, talk to other people because some coordinators won't put themselves on the list, but they're willing to take another person. So get a name and number column. Then ask for your region's list of available coordinators, okay? And see if that person's on there. If they aren't, you need to really try to talk to these coordinators and not just, do you have room for another person? You need to ask questions based on what you think is important. And see, now it's not perfect, but I will say I now have a couple coordinators and my people I've helped some families get some coordinators and they're doing a good job. Anything else, Julie?
Well, Alexandra also shared a document about Medicaid waiver support coordinator list, if anybody wants to grab that thing. Tammy said, other than choosing the provider, are there other differences between CDC Plus and iBudget, please?
Well, yeah, basically, you are driving the train. You become the representative for the individual. You make your own budget. You get that sum of money and you decide where it's spent. You decide who you hire. And there's a little more flexibility in the things you can spend the money on. There are more categories of things. And that's partly because APD doesn't have providers in some of these areas. APD doesn't have music providers and horse therapy providers, but you can use APD money to do that. So I think that's the biggest thing that you have to think of. It's super easy to do. Listen, I'm a computer illiterate. You can ask Julie. Part of the reason I don't do pro presenter, well, no, I can do some, but I don't do slides for my presentation because I have to ask someone else to help me. I'm not really good at that. But I have no problem because the purchasing plan is an Excel sheet. You cannot make a mistake because at the end it says positive or negative, and then you just go back and work the numbers again. Payroll is a simple process every week of going into the payroll site, putting in the person's hours. They now, if they're not an in-home provider, they have to do if they're an in-home provider, they have to do sign in and sign out. But it also says under in-home services that they can take the person out. So, but that you have to check that when you do your payroll. But I do my payroll every week. I sit down Monday morning. You can't do it till 12:01 Monday morning. I used to do it at 12:01 when I was younger and I would still be working at that hour. I don't work at that hour anymore. But I get up in the morning and as soon as my daughter takes off before I start work, I go in and in less than 3 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes, I have the payroll done for 3 people. Okay. So it's not hard. So again, and I've always told people, if you want to try CDC Plus, your waiver support coordinator can only help you so much. They're kind of restricted in that. Give me a call. Listen, I don't mind. I've been doing it since 21. So I've been doing it 19 years now since it became a program. I got on it, I think the end of the first year it was an official program because I was in the control group when they did the pilot. I went through the paper stage all the way to this. I would much rather do it with Excel and the sheets they use for payroll. It makes it super simple. You have to keep up on your background checks on your people, all that. But even that's easy. They give you a link to the clearinghouse that all the agencies use in that, and you can do it.
So we have a couple more questions. Are the support coordinators only required to see the individual twice a year after age 11 and monthly up to age 10? Do you happen to know?
So I don't know about minors. I do know that if they are If they are in supported living, and I believe if they're in a group home, they have to go see them monthly. If they are at home, they don't have to do that. It was 4 times a year. I think they have cut it back. But that's because the waiver support coordinators are usually in touch with the families during that time. But I don't know about that. That's something you need to figure out with someone else, because I don't know that. And then someone asked about companion. Yes, APD, you can have a companion. But I don't, well, no, APD and a day program. So if you have 5 days a day program, I'm not sure that you can have a companion under APD. Anyone that I've had, oh, excuse me, no, I do have a family that did. She went to workshop 5 days a week, and then on the weekend she had a companion one of the days. So you can. So that's where we are.
And then Heather also had a follow-up comment that just said when she was a support coordinator
Yep.
years ago, it was a monthly contract.
Right. It's changed drastically since they did what they did, because it's just a different animal. And these agencies that started because of the LLCs and that started because of having to have 4, they have trouble keeping 4 coordinators and staying with APD. I'm with a very good coordinator group. Teresa knows her, and finding someone that will do the work and do it right is very difficult. Because it's a lot of red tape and they have to put up with a lot of crap to get what you want.
So, and that looks like all of our questions. If you guys have more questions, please put them in the chat, or you could probably unmute yourself and ask your question. Oh, hold on, I got a new one. Oh, Alexandra just said she has an appointment, she has to go, but thanks for a great
Alexandra,
presentation. And Christina said she always loves hearing you explain about the complexities of APD. Thank you, you're a wealth of information. And Monica's saying thank you. So I think we're probably, I mean, you guys are still, I'm not trying to rush you. You're welcome to drop questions in the chat if you would like. And
I'll
we'll,
have questions later after they think
yeah.
about it.
And we'll make sure you guys have Claudia's info so you can reach out to her. While I have you guys for a few minutes, just to let you know, Teresa's putting on another GSI geriatric and special needs scene investigation training. Teresa, do you want to talk about this for a minute and come off mute?
I'll try. I'm in a Sam's parking lot, so maybe it'll be stable. Hey, everybody, so glad you're here. Of course, we are always, always, always thrilled to have Claudia. Claudia is the solution to all the clients that we have with developmental disabilities, and she does so much work around the whole state helping everybody. So this program, of which, by the way, one of the stories in this program is a client's story, basically, that Claudia had. GSI is a training that we do live in living color. It is not by Zoom. Next date will be August 21st, and then again in October 7th. It's about a 6-hour course, 6 credit hours. All these different occupations, attorneys, guardians, paralegals, judges, trustees, they're all approved for the continuing eds. It's a live class that we teach. It's basically a 60-minute treasure hunt of clues about a case. And then after that, we spend about an hour and a half going through what it means, what you should be worried about, what's the highest priority, what's the lowest priority, what do you do? This is a story where you're normally being appointed emergency temporary guardian with limited information about the case. We have 2 scenarios that you'll do in the one day, the one class day, live at Agent's office in Longwood. So we do very small classes, 15 at a time. So we're scheduled right now for August 21st, and then October 7th. Probably we'll do this every 2 months for a while so that everybody can come to these classes, because it's got to be a tiny class. We tried doing 20, it was too many people. So you can take a picture of that.
And it's a lot of fun.
And we'll make sure to send a copy of this out too with all the information so you guys have it.
Okay, and I see some new messages, Julie, in the chat.
Everybody's just saying thank you very much. They really enjoyed Claudia's presentation. They said she was very informative. And they normally shy away. Cheryl said she normally shies away from these cases, and now she's rethinking. So thank you, Claudia.
Now that makes me really happy, because one of the reasons that we're so thrilled to have Claudia is guardians talk about being afraid of APD cases, understandably. So maybe now you won't be quite as afraid because you have Claudia will help you. She will help you. She will help you. She will take your call.
So
She will help.
And we'll make sure you
let
get
me
her
make
contact info.
can I make a comment about that? So because of the interventions that have been done in the last 30 years with the developmentally disabled, more and more of them are able to function somewhat independently. So what's happening is the group homes are full of older clients. There are some younger, but older clients.
Mhm.
And one of the things, I get calls from group homes all the time because their client is sick. They've been with them for 20 years. They know them well. There is no family, and the hospital is saying that they can't, well, APD says they cannot become proxy,
Right.
even though they know this individual. I actually got called into a case last year with a group home that I've worked with before. They did not want the hospital proxy that they were going to give because they were going to pay a licensed clinical social worker. The hospital actually got mad because I was going to do what the individual would want it. First of all, he was Down syndrome, happy-go-lucky, in a group home that goes on cruises. He wanted a chance to live, and the group home believed that as well. So the hospital, one of the social workers actually put an X over the proxy with my name on it. Came back in.
Wow.
The reason I tell this story, and they reinstitute, but the reason I'm telling you this story is APD is going to have to come up with a solution for the amount of people they have that have no responsible party. The group homes are not allowed to interject in the medical. So even if they know a doctor is doing something that probably not in the best interest of the individual, they can't say anything. They just say, okay, we'll do what you said.
Wow.
When they get
Wow.
ill, I mean, it's a very, very, very bad situation. I've talked to multiple lawyers. I was trying to come up with a way to do healthcare surrogacy, to have people, if there already was a guardian in the home and kind of knew the residents, they could become the healthcare surrogate. We looked at a lot of different options. One of the things that Quest Group Homes in this area is talking about, they haven't decided yet, but I do a lot with Quest Group Homes, and they've thought about doing the 5 wishes and having a designation in the 5 wishes book
Good.
of
Good.
somebody.
Something.
And I've
That,
told them, I know a lot of their people because I live in Apopka and I've been around their community. The ones I know, if their person wants me, I'll be in the 5 wishes book. It's better than having no one. It was an awful situation when this guy had no one. And probably because he had no one, his chances, we ended up having to do a DNR. We didn't want to, but it had gone on too long before somebody could make a decision. So, again, in reference to maybe I'll think about that. This is a forgotten demographic. Everybody just assumes they have somebody. A lot of these people have no one. No one.
the other story that I want to tell real quick, that some years ago, Nick and I were contacted by a group home over in Brevard. They had 70, it's a big institutional program, 70 APD, developmentally disabled folks of all ages. All but about 10 had no guardian, and they were getting potentially threatened to be closed down by the state for not having guardians. Where are these people going to go, number one, and how are they going to get a guardian? So if you're considering it, taking one or two of these, Claudia is a phenomenal resource that she'll help anybody. I see this cute comment in our chat. It says Claudia is on all of our speed dials, and we know that and we understand it. So I want to thank you guys for considering the idea, because it's something we can do and give back. And by the way, if you become their guardian, you and your attorney can both potentially be paid out of Agents Benevolent Fund, at least at some portion. So you're not working completely for free. So, all right. So anything else anybody needs before we ring out?
I'm in my car and I can't see anything, but can I say something? Has everybody else talked?
Yeah, go ahead, Marilyn.
Meryl.
Go ahead.
Oh, thanks. So Claudia, I came in this program. I was late today, and I specifically have an APD case. I got a guy that's about 53, that's intellectual, in about 12. intellectually, no family, mother died, father's died, and he's living at Jacaranda Manor. And I found a home, a group home for him, and that because he's medically needy, he can't go on one of the ones where they take care of themselves. He needs, he's had a stroke and he's paralyzed on one side, so he can't walk and he needs help with everything. So anyway, this home though won't take him unless he has APD benefits. And even though I told him I didn't think he did, but I've been told, Sue Ceramic is one of the people that told me, it's just hard to get, because we have zero information about this guy prior to him, prior to when he was younger. And how
So,
do I, and
yeah,
that he's like stuck living at Jacaranda Manor or some other
yes.
nursing home the rest of his life, and he's never going to get out of there. And so I dropped the ball, but I don't want to drop the ball. I want to keep listening and keep hoping and praying that there is
Yeah.
something for him.
So that's a hard situation. One of our scenarios in GSI was a man who probably should have been APD, but he lived with his mom his whole life till she died when he was 60. And we didn't have we were pretty sure he was Down syndrome, but he was a mild Down syndrome. And we had no way, unless we did genetic testing. And at that time I was still fairly new into the guardian world and didn't think about that. So, I mean, I don't think that second, the other thing is he may not go to a regular group home. He may go to a medical group home. So
That's
it's
where he
called
would have to go. And I found one.
Okay,
They have
so
an
what I
opening.
would do, here's what I would do if I was you. So ICFs are not under APD technically. The money is under ICP. When they go if they're in a group home and they go to a medical group home, or they're in community-based services and go to a medical group home, they no longer have a waiver support coordinator, any of that. So what you may want to do is contact the, what area are you in?
Pinellas.
Okay, so I would contact your local APD office and see if you can get someone to give you information to get him qualified to be able to go from the nursing home to ICF, because it would be more appropriate for him. And it's like a home, and they go out and they go to day program and they do those things.
Yeah, I showed them pictures of that today because I had the care plan meeting for him this morning.
Yeah.
And I've let him know that I'm not dropping the ball. And I am going to call you. I'm in my car right now, so
Right.
I'm not even taking notes. But I am going to
That's
call
okay.
you. If there is some hope, then I'm going to ask you, because it says on the APD application, because I worked on this a year ago,
Right.
one of the first things it says is a doctor can't sign off that he's on the autism spectrum and get the benefits.
You don't want autism. You
Oh.
don't want autism. You missed that part of my presentation.
Well, I didn't come in until late. Okay, I get it.
So we want to establish intellectual disability if we can. And I don't know the individual, so I can't say it. Autism is a deep hole these days. So,
okay.
and again, it's not going to be easy, but if it's in his best interest and will give him quality of life, it's worth trying. You said if there's any hope. Teresa was smiling when you said that. I am one of those people that I walk into these situations, and I walked into some that were pretty bad. I can always find a ray of hope somewhere.
This
it may not
is
be
just a
easy.
sweet guy. He was my second ward, and I just want to make this happen so badly.
Yeah. Oh, I see another. Okay, that's great. All right,
All right.
I see another question that's off topic, but I want to address it if I can, from Robin. So Robin asked, how can you prove if the person was disabled prior to 18? She started receiving SSDI January 1st, the year she was turning 18. Well, first of all, she's receiving SSDI. She is a disabled adult child under Social Security. Now, we all know Social Security has their rules and APD has their rules. But that means there's some proof of disability somewhere, okay? Most likely at Social Security. So if you can get a hold of what they have that helped prove her to be disabled, then you could potentially use that to get APD. Another comment I'm going to make, just so um, any of you who have dealt with someone who didn't get on SSI before the age of 22, or SSI before the age of 22, or was on SSDI because they already had a parent at 18 that they could draw off of. And then Medicaid says, no, you don't qualify for the protective Medicaid. I'm starting to challenge that. First of all, the rule regarding that says that they had to be eligible for SSI. They would have been eligible. But the big thing is Social Security updated their website. And if you go to the types of SSDI, one of them is an individual who was determined had a disability. I forget how they word it, but basically has a proof of a disability before the age of 21. It doesn't say they get the benefit before 21. So they're saying if at 27 parents finally apply because they realize their kid isn't going to be as productive as they had hoped, then that person would be eligible for the DAC benefit with Social Security, and that should make them eligible for the protected Medicaid. Now I'm just getting ready to play with this on a couple cases, but I have said this, Teresa will tell you, I get so angry about this because they would have been eligible. It's not their fault that the parent was disabled and they were already got SSDI. So again, that's not APD, but it's all the same animal. How do we get maximum benefit? That's what we have to do.
So, Michelle, your question where you say that Social Security told you, that there was no paperwork or no, they do that crap all the time. They tell you that malarkey. So you really have to be a little bit more assertive and request their whole background. And you have to keep pushing and pushing because that's not necessarily true, even though they say it just to get you off the phone.
Okay, Teresa, I know a little bit about this because I had a representative say something. So they changed their computer program in the late 80s. That's when they stopped giving SSI, SSDI together and some of those things, doing that on a regular basis. So the problem is, no, there aren't computer records because they upgraded their computers. They didn't keep it, but they have boxes and boxes and boxes of evidence. It's no different than the VA for the years I remember wanting my dad's record so I could get his medals because he had lost all his medals. And they said, oh, it was in the fire in the warehouse. And 3 years later, I get medals and his record. So, again, I'm not telling you that you're going to be successful, but our job as a guardian is to do whatever we can to get our people what they're supposed to have. And especially if they don't have resources. So, and it sucks. You can ask Teresa, I gained a vocabulary going to work in this business.
She used to not swear, by the way.
I didn't. But I tell you, it makes me mad because it's a person's life. It's a person's life.
Monica says everything burned up in that fire. That is everybody's favorite horse crap story. The fire in Cleveland that burned all the VA records from the beginning.
Yeah. And they had duplicate records in Colorado is what came up later. So,
Allison had a good suggestion. She said if there's any school records, sometimes a psych eval can be inside of the IEP notes. So
yes.
Sometimes things are inside of things that you don't realize that they are in there.
And it's funny that
it's hard to find records for a kid that went to school in Ohio. He's 53, 50, whatever years old.
It is hard, but
and nobody can tell me where he went because everybody's dead.
And your own peace of mind is you have to keep trying till you either fail or you succeed. And you just keep trying because it's weird sometimes records end up being found by the weirdest thing you do, like the friend who had some of his boxes in their storage unit for 20 years gets a hold of you and says, I've got these boxes, do they mean anything to you? That stuff happens. It happens. So anyway, you just keep trying because it's all you can do. So Monica
you
says
need
the
to be
fire.
aware of.
Monica says the fire was in St. Louis.
All right. Well, one of the things you need to be very aware of is when my daughter's 40, when she went into school at 3, they did a educational psych every 3 years. They no longer do that in most districts. You might get 1 or 2. So, again, it's no, and yes, it's often hidden in the IEP. I just had a family that swore they didn't have an educational psych, and I found 2 of them sitting at their dining room table in 5 minutes because I knew to flip through and I knew what to look for. But more important than that, it's the idea that the disability is there and it's working around these rules and regulations and finding a way to get someone to recognize that it's in everybody's best interest. It's not in this 53-year-old man's best interest to be laying in a nursing home.
No,
And
it's not.
it wouldn't be quite
Claudia,
as much.
Claudia, can you talk about where they get the genetic testing done from? Are there specific providers or where? Do you know?
So genetic testing, it isn't, Down syndrome is the one that's the most helpful for. I mean, there are some others, but when you look at developmental disabilities, even if you got tested and they said they had Rett syndrome or one of those, it's not a guarantee their IQ was under 70. They're still going to want that proof. But you go to a geneticist who will do the testing. My one family that I suggested did that didn't have to, because when they said they were willing to do the genetic testing, they suddenly got approved.
Is that something typically going to get paid for under health insurance or Medicaid, or is that something
No.
they have to private pay?
No, it would be out of pocket.
Any idea the cost ballpark?
I don't know. This
Okay.
family didn't care what the cost was. They were willing to do it if they had to, but they didn't have to.
Okay.
So
we got another comment. Apparently Michelle said she sent in 800 pages to APD with an IQ of 65 and they still denied it. They're waiting for a hearing.
okay. Well, and I'm very picky about what I send to APD. So I don't send IEPs. I send the worst IEP because you have to send 1 or 2. I find the worst ones because IEPs are a dream. They ask the individual, what do you want to be? I want to be a brain surgeon. And they document it in the IEP. And Social Security and APD will use those things to deny. So when you're sending records, we always say more is better. No, more if it works to your advantage.
And apparently
has
she only
different
sent
standards,
half
Michelle.
of what New York sent her. So she was
I
trying to be
understand.
careful.
But New York doesn't do things the way we do them. That family from New York that got denied with APD and then I finally got it. I mean, the things they said actually worked against them with APD rules. What the record said. So, again, I'm not saying you did wrong or that the records weren't good. All I'm saying is I give enough, but I try not to give so much that I trip myself up in the process.
So
I would rather
sometimes,
have to send in more later than to send it in and be denied right away.
Okay.
so sometimes less is more.
Okay, Julie, one last thing. Can you please bring up the peer roundtable Zoom schedule?
I was already going to do that.
Thank
Tracy's
you.
reading my
Thank you.
mind. So I
There's a
was going to say,
lot.
we're getting long on time, and I know lots of people are talking about how they have to go. Here's the webinar and roundtable meeting schedule. The next roundtable meeting is the second Tuesday. That's July 8th. It'll be bright and early in the morning from 8 to 9:30, and you can register right here. We also have a roundtable every third Wednesday of the month from 3 to 4, and you can register right here. There's one the last Wednesday of the month, which they just had it yesterday. It was crazy town from what I hear. Lots of tech craziness. That's from 5 to 6 at night if you guys can't make the early morning or the afternoon ones. And then the one we were on today, we have the fourth Thursday of the month. There's a guest speaker like Miss Claudia, where we try to get you guys some helpful information so you guys can do your job better and help your clients better.
And
You
most of the
find
speakers aren't as crazy as me.
I don't know. You find all that information on the Guardian Peer website, but please attend more of these roundtables because sometimes we only have 5 or 6 people is okay, but like this next one, Nick and I are traveling back right now from the Florida Bar Convention down in Boca. I have oodles of information of stuff that I want to talk about that I learned at the conference. And most of those roundtables, they're not CEs and they're not for a specific subject, but we talk about all kinds of things. Like, for example, on July 8th, Central Florida chapter of the FSGA is going to have Dr. Hawk do a presentation about the new situation with these new hospital DNRs versus the community DNRs. We're in the process right now of making it a Zoom. It's not done yet. We have some technology struggles to make it a Zoom, but it's a live luncheon for the chapter of FSGA, Central Florida chapter. Diana Shields is the chapter president, and she's having it at a assisted living facility called The Bridges in Orlando. But we need more people attending these roundtables so that the subjects that you guys want to talk about, the forums you want to share, the information you want to ask about, more people need to come. It's 30, 40 minutes. Plenty of people do it in their car, driving between appointments. That's fine. It's perfectly fine. I want to see more faces. All right.
Want to
Bye,
point
guys.
out
Thank
what
you very
Sharon Noth,
much.
I was going to say the
noticed.
same thing. Go ahead, Claudia.
Yeah, Sharon Noth actually works for Orange County Public Schools, and I didn't even know this. She said all IEPs are uploaded to a portal for the Department of Education in Florida. So if you've got a Florida person, again, how long they hold them at DOE, we don't know, but at least it's another resource.
Great. And that's exactly what this whole peer group is about. It's about Sharon knows something that Kelly doesn't know. Kelly knows something that Claudia doesn't know. Claudia knows something that Ken doesn't know. You know, this goes on and on. So come as often as you can, because you might be sitting right there at your desk trying to solve this daggone problem. And little did you know there was another guardian who already solved that problem last week.
And I dropped the link in the chat. I'll drop it again for you guys. But if you ever need to find a meeting, it's floridaguardian.com/meetings. And all the meeting links are there for you guys.
All right.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Claudia. Thank you so much for doing it, as always. Thank you guys all for being here. Every month we have one of these. I got, right now, I've got 2026 almost full. So we do this all the time to have really good speakers on subjects that you guys need, because Agent funds this and Agent supports all the guardians all over Florida, because I did it for 30 years. I kind of know what you need. So I'm happy to help. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you at the next meeting. Have a good one.